I, 25-year-old male, will be getting married to my fiancée Grace, 25-year-old female, next year. We're some time away from sending invites yet, but the topic came up during Christmas with my family. My dad mentioned my half-sister Camilla, 32-year-old female, and the fact I had not communicated anything about the wedding to her. I told him it was because I was not planning to invite her. My dad's reaction and my refusal started a dispute on the topic, and almost 2 months to the day, it's still an issue in which my dad and younger brother, 19-year-old male, feel like I'm wrong, and my mom and younger sister, 23-year-old female, feel I'm right about. Background to help explain my reasoning. My dad was married to Camilla's mom, and they divorced when she was 1. Camilla's mom was actually a friend of my Aunt Jean's, Dad's sister, until the divorce. She used Camilla to get back at my dad. She tried to deny him access to her. She attempted to move out of state with Camilla, and all kinds of other things. It was messy. Dad and her shared custody of Camilla, and Dad used the courts to make sure she stopped withholding and didn't move. When my parents met, Camilla's mom became fixated on a hatred for my mom that was really severe. She showed up and would yell at my mom. It could be anywhere from my grandparents' house to my parents' house. She would create scenes, and a couple of times the police were called to make her leave. She would always stop shy of divorcing. I only remember the trouble between Camilla's mom and my family. I also remember Camilla really being awful to my mom and regurgitating a lot of what her mom would say back at my mom. She was really unfair to mom, and mom didn't even have to be doing anything for Camilla to insult her. It wasn't easy to be a witness to at all. I know step-family relationships are complicated, and step-parents can be tricky for kids. I don't think Camilla is wrong to not feel love for mom, or to not want her to be her mom or her parent. But it didn't end there. When I was 6, Camilla's mom was arrested, and things got a little more crazy. She threw things at our house when we were all home, and Camilla was telling her mom when we were all home so she could come to do it. Camilla's mom thought it would scare Dad into giving up custody, and that he and mom wouldn't call the police. Camilla's mom served time and never got custody of Camilla back. Camilla was 13 at the time. Camilla still hated mom, and as recently as 2 years ago, she still laughed about what happened and defended her mom. I heard her say awful things about my mom and say she was glad her mom did it and what she did wasn't wrong. So for those reasons, and the fact she doesn't even consider me a sibling, I don't want her there. Dad wants me to invite her anyway, and my brother, who is like Dad's biggest fan and his twin, sides with him. They think I don't have a valid enough reason to not send an invite and let her come if she wants as a regular guest. Am I the jerk? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. You are 25 and a fully grown man who has thought this through and reached a logical conclusion. You won't be fully able to enjoy your special day if she is there. You'll be wondering if she might make a scene or say something out of line. Camilla likely won't be happy seeing you all happy on your big day if she is there. Don't borrow trouble. I feel sorry that Camilla, like my own niece, was weaponized to get back at an ex-spouse, my sibling in my case, who refused to give up his child and just go away when the other spouse filed for divorce. Comment 2. Hell no. Not the idiot. Not only is it yours and your fiancé's wedding, your mom will, I assume, be there too. You are not obligated to feel uncomfortable at your own wedding, or to make your mom uncomfortable, to make someone else happy. Tell your dad to wake up and smell reality. He is in a fantasy world if he thinks you all can just be one big happy family after all that. Even if you wanted to try to re-establish a relationship with Camille and work through all of that history, your wedding is not the place or time to do it. Congrats on your engagement. Now, for the update. Hey Reddit, back with an update on the family drama surrounding my wedding. It's been 2 weeks since I last posted, and let me tell you, things have only gotten more intense. So to catch you up real quick, I'm getting married to Grace next year, and I decided not to invite my half-sister Camilla to the wedding. This caused a huge rift in my family, with my dad and younger brother on one side, and my mom and younger sister on the other. Camilla's always been pretty awful to my mom, echoing the hatred her own mom had for her. It's been a mess, to say the least. Now, onto the new stuff. Just when I thought things couldn't get more heated, Camilla found out she wasn't invited. How, you ask? Well, my younger brother, who's always trying to play peacemaker, let it slip during one of their phone calls. Big mistake. Camilla went ballistic. She started this massive text rant in the family group chat, saying things like how I was tearing the family apart, and how I was just like my mom, trying to exclude her. This set off a chain reaction. My dad, who's always had a soft spot for Camilla, tried to reason with me again. He said that family should be together no matter what, especially at important events like weddings. But I stood my ground. I couldn't just forget all the times Camilla had sided with her mom during those awful confrontations with my mom. Meanwhile, Grace has been an absolute rock. She's been supportive of my decision, but the stress of the family feud is starting to get to her. She's always dreamed of a perfect wedding, and now she's worried it'll be overshadowed by family drama. The real jaw-dropper came when my Aunt Jean, who's been out of the picture since Camilla's mom and my dad split, decided to weigh in. She called me out of the blue, saying she'd heard about the situation from my dad. Aunt Jean has always been the type to stir the pot, and she didn't disappoint. She told me that excluding Camilla was just going to perpetuate the cycle of resentment and bitterness that started with our parents. I couldn't believe she was getting involved after all these years of silence. But wait, it gets worse. Camilla, in a move that shocked everyone, showed up at my mom's house unannounced. She wanted to have a face-to-face confrontation. My mom, who's been through enough with this family, refused to engage and told Camilla to leave, but Camilla wouldn't budge, insisting they talk it out. It was a standoff that ended with my mom calling me, nearly in tears, asking me to handle it. I rushed over, and the scene was like something out of a reality show. Camilla was on the front lawn, yelling about how she was being treated unfairly, while my mom watched from the window, visibly shaken. I had to step in and tell Camilla that this wasn't the way to solve anything. She finally left, but not before promising that this wasn't over. The aftermath has been a mess. My younger sister, who's always been my ally, is now getting cold feet about being in the wedding party. She's afraid of being caught in the crossfire if Camilla decides to retaliate. And my younger brother, bless his heart, is trying to mend fences, but he's just making things more complicated. As for my dad, he's been trying to play the mediator, but it's clear his loyalties are divided. He's been dropping hints that maybe I should reconsider for the sake of family unity, but every time he brings it up, it just reignites the argument. So here we are, 2 weeks later, and the conflict is as unresolved as ever. My wedding, which should be a time of celebration, is now overshadowed by this ongoing feud. Grace and I are trying to focus on our future together, but it's hard when the past keeps rearing its ugly head. Cousin plans second wedding, the day before mine after 15 years of marriage, and I confront, but they cancel it later, BC of marital issues, and now I'm torn between relief and sadness. My 29-year-old cousin Frankie, 33-year-old, and his wife Nora, 32-year-old, have been married almost 15 years. They got married a couple weeks after Nora's 18th birthday. Last weekend, they announced to the family at a get-together that they were having a second wedding in September, as they were now in a position where they could afford to finally celebrate their marriage with friends and family the way they wanted to. When they originally married, it was just the two of them and 2 friends at the courthouse. But Nora had always wanted the big, fancy white wedding. Now, usually this wouldn't be a problem. I'm happy for Frankie and Nora and excited to get to attend their wedding. However, the date they've picked is the day before my wedding. My fiancé, 29 years old, and I have been together for 9 years and have been planning our wedding for the last 3 years. We have our date and venue booked for 2 years. Our save the dates only went out last month. When they announced their date, I asked Nora privately if they were joking with the date they had picked. Nora looked at me really confused until I pointed out they were having their second wedding the day before my wedding. Nora told me that the date they'd chosen was the date they'd met in high school, and it was an important date to them. Later on, Frankie asked me why I wasn't happy for them, and I told him that it was rude of them to have their second wedding the day before mine. I told him that he had essentially ruined my wedding because no one is going to attend 2 weddings in a row on a weekend, especially not our elderly grandparents. Frankie apologized and said he didn't know our wedding date when they booked it. He told me that they weren't going to move the date and had the gall to suggest that I move my wedding if it matters that much to me. I snapped and told him that it was tacky to have a redo wedding because they decided to get married on a whim at 18 with barely a penny between. Frankie got mad at me, and Nora and him left shortly after. That night, Frankie and my aunt, his mom, sent me angry messages telling me that I know why they got married so young. Nora came from a hurtful household. She was essentially the punching bag for her brother, and her mother let the abuse continue. They married because Nora and Frankie saw it as her only way out. my aunt and Frankie have since told other family members, who are mostly mad, that I suggested Frankie move his second wedding. Some think that given he's already married, then he should move it. Am I the idiot for asking my cousin to move the date of his wedding? My save the dates didn't go out until last month. However, my family has been aware since we booked it. We have a family group chat that Frankie is in, and I posted it there. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the jerk. It's extremely weird that they picked this date at all, and it's quite obvious they lied about not knowing the date. Also, not sure how that little sob story your aunt told has any relevance whatsoever here. You can leave your home at 18 without being married, and also, why would that mean it's okay for you to pick the day before your relative's wedding as your wedding date? They sound completely deranged. It might not be a bad thing not to have them at your wedding. Comment 2. Not the jerk. If that date was so important for them, they could have arranged their second wedding next year. Choosing the day before your wedding was selfish and entitled. However, there's a simple solution to that. Don't attend their wedding. Your own should be much more important to you. Now, for the update. Hey everyone. It's been 2 weeks since I last posted about the wedding date drama with my cousin Frankie and his wife Nora, and boy, do I have an update for you all. So after the big blowout at the family get-together, things went from bad to worse. Frankie and Nora had been pretty quiet after the argument, but then, out of nowhere, I got a text from Frankie. He wanted to meet up and talk things through. I agreed, hoping we could find some middle ground. We met at our favorite childhood diner, a place filled with memories of us sharing fries and plotting our futures. Frankie looked stressed, and I could tell this whole situation was weighing on him. He started off by apologizing for the way things went down. He explained that he and Nora had been so caught up in the romance of their high school sweetheart story that they didn't consider the impact on my wedding. But then, Frankie dropped a bombshell. He confessed that he and Nora had been having problems in their marriage. The second wedding wasn't just about having the big celebration they missed out on. It was also an attempt to rekindle their relationship. My heart sank. I had no idea they were struggling. They always seemed like the perfect couple, but I guess you never know what goes on behind closed doors. Frankie's revelation made me see the situation in a new light. I felt for them. I really did. But it didn't change the fact that their second wedding was overshadowing mine. We talked for hours, trying to come up with a solution, but we kept hitting a wall. Then, a few days later, I got a call from Nora. She was in tears. She told me that after Frankie and I talked, they had a huge fight. Nora had found out that Frankie had been texting an old flame from high school. She was devastated. The heartbreak in her voice was palpable. She said she didn't know if there would even be a second wedding now. I was shocked. Frankie, the guy who once punched a bully for making fun of my braces, was now the one causing pain. I tried to comfort Nora, but what could I say? The situation was a mess. The family was in an uproar when they found out about Frankie's indiscretion. My aunt was beside herself, trying to mediate between her son and Nora. The rest of the family was split. Some were sympathetic to Nora, while others couldn't believe Frankie would do something like this. In the midst of all this, my own wedding planning was put on hold. My fiancé was supportive, but I could tell he was frustrated that our special day was being overshadowed by drama. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Frankie came to my house. He was a wreck. He admitted everything to me, how he had been feeling trapped, and that texting the old flame was a stupid mistake. He said he was going to therapy to work on himself, and that he wanted to fix his marriage. But the real kicker? Frankie told me they were cancelling their second wedding. He realized that it wasn't fair to me or to Nora to go through with it under the circumstances. He said he needed to focus on mending his relationship before they could even think about celebrating it. I was floored. I didn't know whether to be relieved that my wedding was no longer being upstaged or sad for the state of Frankie and Nora's marriage. As for my wedding, it's back on track, but the joy of planning has been tainted by the sadness of what's happened. I never wanted things to turn out this way. I wanted Frankie and Nora to be happy, to have that big celebration they dreamed of. But now, it seems like they have a long road ahead of them before they can even think about walking down the aisle again. My mother-in-law's husband wants our baby named after him, but when husband's friend finds late dad's letter, we stand our ground, and now she's thinking of leaving him. I had a baby with my husband 2 weeks ago. Our son's first name is in honor of his late grandfather, my late father-in-law, and my husband's late dad. He died while my husband was still a young child, and I never met him. But he means a great deal to my husband still. The name isn't my late father-in-law's first name, but a childhood nickname that is also a real name. Few would know this. Only those close to my father-in-law, or who knew him a long time. My mother-in-law was aware of the name, obviously, but her husband would not have been without my mother-in-law saying something to him about it. This did happen, and her husband was hurt that my husband chose to honor just his late dad, and not him, the man who has been married to my mother-in-law since he was 7. My husband is not fond of his mom's husband, and that's what he is to my husband, just the man his mom is married to. He wanted to be a father to him and was too pushy while my husband was a child. He wanted my husband to take his name, he wanted to adopt my husband, and he calls my husband his son. He dragged my husband along to father-son activities for Father's Day every year once he married my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was always hopeful that my husband would be fine with that and would love her husband as his second dad. She always stayed more quiet, though. There are a lot of tensions between the three. My husband still doesn't care for the man his mom married and resents his mom for wanting him to have another dad and for not stepping in and stopping her husband from being so pushy. My mother-in-law has her own resentments toward my husband. I think on her part, she feels as though my husband wanted her to stay single forever. Apparently, as a teenager, he confessed he wished she had not remarried, so she holds on to that. Then there's her husband. He is fully aware that my husband does not care for him and does not regard him as a father figure, but he feels like he earned it, and he chooses to ignore it all and acts like he's dad and granddad. This all bubbled over yesterday when my mother-in-law and her husband visited my son and me. They were quiet at first, but then commented on his two names not fitting well together. I ignored that comment, but then they said how sad it is that both grandfathers couldn't be honored in the name, and how our son's first name would have gone so much better with my mother-in-law's husband's name as a middle name. I told them I did not want to hear them suggest more names or commentary on my son's name. They tried to speak, but I shut them down by saying they are not my son's parents, and I am not interested in hearing their feelings on the name. I suggested they leave and speak to a neutral third party about it if they needed to vent their feelings, but I was not a therapist and was not the person to vent to. They accused me of being rude and disrespectful. They complained to my husband, who was not calm at all in how he spoke to them. I now wonder if I was overly harsh, strict with shutting them down. Am I the idiot? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. I can only hope that the existence of Reddit helps current and future step-parents learn to avoid this pushy, I am your parent now crap, with kids who are not looking for replacements. If people would just meet the children where they are, emotionally, so many families would be saved, lots of heartache. Mother-in-law's husband has known since he joined this family that OP's husband did not want a second dad. Instead of accepting that and finding a way to have a relationship that worked for the kid, he kept trying to force his own dad fantasy on a kid who missed his own father. Only selfish adults force children to carry the burden of the adult's emotional well-being, hopes, and dreams. It's disgusting and unhealthy. Comment 2. Not the idiot. So you're rude and disrespectful for telling them they are not the parents and get zero say in what you and DH name your child. But it's not rude or disrespectful of them to harp on the name and tell you how they do not like it. I get it now. The old double standard rises to the top again. I would tell them both that until they get their mouths and emotions under control about your child's name, they are no longer welcome in your home or to visit with your child. Then ask them if that's rude and disrespectful enough for them. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. It's been 3 months since I shared the story about the drama surrounding my son's name, and boy, have things escalated. After the confrontation with my mother-in-law and her husband, things cooled off for a bit. My husband and I thought maybe they'd gotten the message and would back off. But we were wrong. It turns out, my mother-in-law's husband had been stewing over the name situation more than we realized. One day, out of the blue, he showed up at our house with a family tree chart. He'd traced back his own lineage, trying to find a name that could somehow connect to our son. He presented it to us, saying it was a gesture of goodwill and a way to bridge the gap between him and my husband. But my husband saw right through it. He was furious, feeling like this was another attempt to force a bond that just wasn't there. The tension had been building for years. ever since my husband was a kid. His stepdad had always tried to insert himself into my husband's life, even though my husband never felt comfortable with it. He remembered the awkward Father's Day outings and the constant pressure to change his last name. It was too much, and now it was happening all over again with our son. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, was torn. She loved her husband, but also understood where my husband was coming from. She had hoped that with time, they would grow closer, but it was clear that wasn't going to happen. She tried to mediate, suggesting maybe we could use her husband's name as a second middle name, but that just made things worse. The real twist came when my husband's childhood friend, who had known his late father, came to visit. He brought with him an old box of mementos that had belonged to my husband's dad. Inside, we found letters and photos, but most shockingly, a letter written to my husband from his dad, penned just before he passed away. In it, he expressed his hopes for my husband's future and his deep love for him. It was a moment of raw emotion for my husband, and it solidified his decision about our son's name. The letter became a turning point. My husband sat down with his mom and her husband and read it out loud. It was a heart-wrenching moment, and for the first time, I think his stepdad saw the depth of the bond between my husband and his late father. There was a long, uncomfortable silence after the letter was read. His stepdad finally spoke up, apologizing for pushing so hard to be recognized in our son's name. He admitted he just wanted to feel like he was part of the family. But apologies couldn't undo years of tension. My husband acknowledged the apology, but made it clear that while he could be civil, he couldn't force a connection that wasn't there. It was a tough pill for everyone to swallow, but it was the truth. Since then, visits have been less frequent and more strained. My mother-in-law's husband has taken a step back, and while there's a sense of loss there, there's also a sense of relief. We've been able to focus on our little family and the new life we've brought into the world. Just when we thought things were settling down, another surprise hit us. My mother-in-law confessed that she'd been feeling disconnected from her husband for years, and the recent events had only highlighted their differences. She was considering a separation, something none of us saw coming. It's been a ride of emotions, and we're all trying to navigate this new dynamic. My husband and I are doing our best to support my mother-in-law through this tough time, while also protecting our own family's peace. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.